welcome back to the Old Doghouse Workshop. This is part 4 of a 4-part video on making a universal head and bracket assembly for the Clarkson cutter grinder. This episode is concentrating on the holder that will enable me to sharpen the flutes on straight shank drills and milling cutters, and with more accessories that I've got to make yet, I'll be able to do a whole lot more. As you can see, the material in the lathe is a bit rusty. It's the end piece off an old drive shaft. Although I'm using the 3-jaw chuck, I'm still clocking up the material at the chuck end. And I'm also using a modified steady to support the other end. When I finish the long spigot dimension, I'll be doing that between centres, and using the steady is the best way to achieve the greatest accuracy for creating the centre hole in the end face. This material, as with most of the material I've used so far, is quite hard. Naturally, I'll be taking my time with this, and there'll be no deep or heavy cuts. You'll see that whilst I'm machining along this bar, I've got a piece of wood retaining most of the swarf that's coming off the material itself. The reason I've got this on here is to sort of help protect the slideways for as long as possible, and it also helps a bit with the cleaning up. The wood itself isn't held in by anything other than a loose screw through the wood and in a redundant hole. If I want to take the board away at any time, it's just a case of lift it slightly and out it comes. After breaking the corner off, all I've got to do is to put the material in the saw to take off the excess material that's currently in the jaw, and turn it round and machine the other end. Here I'm machining the end face, and I'm also going to do the outside diameter of the greater diameter, just to clean it up. This end is going to be machined to take an EN32 tapered collet and collet locking nut. This end is not only going to be threaded to use my existing EN32 locking nut, but it's going to have 2 flats milled in to accept the same spanner as the arbor in my milling machine. For good measure, I'm also machining in a thread relief. I'm now in the process of rough drilling the end face. It's in preparation to machine the 8-degree taper socket for the collets. I'm taking it steady because, as I told you earlier, the material is quite hard. I don't want to break anything, so I've got to take it easy. Not only is this pilot drill aiding the rest of the drilling process, but it will be used to re-guide the centre drill after the socket is completed. It's to allow the material to be held between centres, and the centre for this end will have to be an extended centre. At 19mm, this is the biggest drill I can use for this part of the process. That is before I start using the boring bar. If I use any bigger drills, the bottom of the socket will be too big and will remove some of the material I need to grip the collet. The compound slide is now set to an 8-degree taper. Off camera, I verified as best as I could the collet taper by using whiteboard marker. After the marker ink had dried, I lightly placed the collet in the socket and rotated it. After removing the collet, there's a telltale witness of ink residue. This provides information about my taper setting. To assist in correcting any errors, I use a DTI against the boring bar. This allowed me to adjust the compound slide before taking another cut in the bore. This process took me 3 goes to get it right. Once the compound slide is set to maintain the correct taper, the height that the collet protrudes out of the main body should not exceed 15 millimeters. 15 millimeters is the height the collet protrudes out of the milling harbour, so I'm going to make it the same on this tool holder. At this point I forgot to run the camera while I was cutting the thread for the collet locking nut. The thread change gears had to be swapped out to get the 1.5mm thread required. Then they all had to be swapped back to allow the lower feed rates to be used once more. At least the locking nut doesn't rattle anyway. Here I'm putting an extended centre into the chuck with a little bit of room, but I'm not just going to put it in the chuck and call it quits. I'm going to remachine the point just to maintain concentricity. I'm machining this comb to the required dimensions purely in preparation for the next operation. All I'm doing here is checking to see if everything fits without interfering with anything. I'm over at the milling machine now to put the two flats on the major diameter. This needs two flats to be at 37mm across the flats. The major diameter is 40mm, so the flats are going to be quite small, as they are on the original armour. I'm using two V-blocks against the reference jaw in the vise, and then I'm using a ground milling spacer to place the material at a given reference position away from the jaws. Here I'm trapping the same ground spacer to maintain the material position to mill the second of the two flats. I'm using two parallels, one on top of the other, to square the first milled flat true to the table and therefore true to the milling cutter. That's both sides complete now. Now it's time to go back to the lathe and finish the spigot dimension. The material is now back in between centres. I'm taking a light skim cut to remove any irregularities produced during the roughing out process. I've now found a problem with the tool holder. It's becoming more oval nearer the jaws. I can only assume that it's caused by having an out of balance driver, and because I'm also running at 800 RPM, the chuck centre must be flexing. To counter this issue, what I've done is I've replaced the driver with a more balanced unit. This corrected the problem. On the last three cuts, parallelism and roundness remained stable, and the finish wasn't quite as good as I expected it to be, but it did finish true and to size at 31.73mm. Now it's ready to fit into the universal head collar. Getting it in took a bit of wriggling at first, but it went in and I checked it out, and it was quite good considering that nothing had been ground. It's got a tiny bit of play, about 0.01mm, but I'm not going to worry too much about that yet. Using oil as a lubricant was always going to be fraught with danger, as oil will always capture dust and fine grit, just the very environment you get around a grinder. So to lubricate the tool holder, I've used graphite polish. I've never tried it, but I understand that talcum powder can be used. With a 6mm end mill in the collet of the tool holder, I got a run out of 0.005mm. Extending the tool holder out to its fullest extent, the run out was 0.01mm. For now, I think that's pretty good, and I can't wait until I sharpen a tool and check it in the milling machine. I can't sharpen any tools yet because I've got to make a few more bits and bobs like bushes and guides and things, but for now I'm done. Thumbs up if you like the videos. I'll be only too pleased to answer any comments you leave, and once again, thanks for watching. Bye for now.